Hello, and welcome to Clay to Canopy, the show where I attempt to make just about everything from the ground up. Welcome to the June 2025 vlog, and welcome to the absolute tornado of a mess that my studio currently is. When last we met, I still had 2 weeks left till school. I thought, okay, I'm gonna be able to jump in, start cranking, and get a good go. And the very next day, after my last day of school, I got hit with the most nastiest cold. It knocked me on my butt for 2 weeks. I still have a bit of a cough. It is June 12th. I thought I'd have a good 2 weeks at least of doing stuff. I've literally only been on my feet and moving about for the past maybe 3 days. So nothing really got done in terms of the inside studio. I didn't make any forward progress. I'm going to take you on a walkthrough over what projects I have going in this space, kind of what's sitting around. But I can't get to any of that until I clean up the patio, which is an absolute disaster, and deal with some garden things. If y'all been following me for a while, y'all know I'm a pescatarian. Sarah and I are both pescatarian. A good 80% of our meals are pretty much vegetarian, and maybe 2 to 3 dinners a week may include seafood, but the rest of the 18 to 19 meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinners are primarily vegetarian. So the garden is a major contributor to where we get our fresh produce, especially during the summertime. Cook mainly from the garden as much as I possibly can. Because we were both ill for that length of time, the garden really didn't quite get where it needs to be in order for us to ensure that we have a food source for not only just the summer months, but a lot of the vegetables, the tomatoes, the pumpkins, the squash, things that can get chopped up and frozen. I use for soups during the winter time. We grow drying beans that end up in soups as well. Those become our major source of protein throughout the year. So all of that stuff needed to be addressed. And so the 3 days that I've been on my feet and any time in between towards the tail end of finishing up school, I've been concentrating my efforts on squaring away the garden. Since this is such a disaster in here, I've been trying to do any major cutting of wood pieces and things out in the drive area in front of the dragon, just because it's safer than being in this congested space. But right now there's a massive amount of debris and trash and crap that we pulled out of the garden that needs to be dealt with. I am going to give you a garden tour, but I'm going to save that for the end of the video. So if you're interested in looking at any of the garden stuff, you'll want to hang around to take a look at the garden situation and those projects that I've been working on. But I just wanted to basically check in, let you know where things are going. Obviously did not get to the things I wanted to get to. I still am up in the air over whether or not I'll be able to get back to the So Not Walled In series. It really is going to depend on what happens in this studio space in terms of furniture. I am planning to try and do at least one fall pop-up, probably more than one, as long as I have some stock for it. And so I need to get moving on the furniture that's going to be sold also, so I can feel less congested by this mess. Hopefully by July I will have a better idea over whether or not I'm able to go back to the So Not Walled In series. I have no idea still what fall is going to look like, how many classes I have, what my schedule is going to look like. I could be on campus more days, long days. I have no idea. So at the end of the day, I may only have 1 day off a week to do anything in the studio come the fall. I can't make the commitment to myself to say, oh yeah, we'll just save So Not Walled In and start it up in the fall. I don't want to set myself up for disappointment until I know more about what's going to happen in terms of that schedule. I'm filing So Not Walled In out of my head and going to concentrate on what I can get done in terms of knocking out some furniture. I think it'll go pretty quickly because the thing that sucked up so much of my time was designing. Usually the build part goes a lot faster. So let's take a look at where the furniture stands right now. I got one piece of furniture here that's sitting waiting for the tops to get their stain finish and then placed upon the top. I had a bunch of these kid furniture sets that were just random parts to this castle daybed thing, and I've cut them up. They're going to become these seats, like a window bench with storage. I have random parts that I have found from old tables that were discarded, and that's in the works. So there's going to be a set of 3 of them that will be benches and 3 that are going to be open shelving that kind of match it. Still oriented where it could be for a kid's room or it could be even for a small living room. Here in California, we don't have as much space over on the East East Coast. Houses are big. There's lots of rooms. Here, it is very tight spaces. So the idea of having these giant, like, castle-sized kids' beds are not always feasible for most homes here in California. I'm trying to tailor some of this furniture to being a little bit more adaptable. These here pieces are for tabletops. These were slats for the bed that I've been prepping, and they are going to be, here's my model. This is the model. These are, I'm thinking, our coffee tables. So this is the center part. This is this funky chair. Swoop back mid-century modern replica chair. I'm going to be cutting that up and turning it into that coffee table over there. And the legs are going to become bases for the matching end tables that will match this coffee table. It's just going to be a floating box. It didn't make a model of that, but that is basically what all of these pieces are going to be right here. That's what I'm working on so far. Then I still have that pile mess of things going on. I have ideas for what most of those pieces are going to be. And as the summer progresses, I'm going to walk you through these projects a little more carefully. Alright y'all, that was a look at the larger pieces. Now I want to take you inside to show you some of the smaller things, the smaller items I have been working on. I've been making some handmade bags out of scrap fabrics and some brand new fabrics. Anytime I use a textile, I don't really want to use thrifted items. Things that people have sat on that are fabrics, absorb, human things. I'm really skeeved out when it comes to fabrics and textiles, so I always will strip everything down, even the foam, and all of that gets discarded, and I will start with fresh upholstery. It is the same with the bags that I've been creating, these handbags. Something I still want to have in the booth. What I'm calling my recycling or reusing is really about diving into scrap piles, leftover bits from larger projects that I saved the fabric from, rescued it in that sense. So it's not used fabric, but it is rescued fabric. I've also been working on some smaller objects out of felt because I have a ton of felt. That's also leftover projects. So we're going to head inside and take a look at that. All right, first up, let me show you my felt objects. And because I was sick, I couldn't do too much, but I needed to keep my hands moving. So I worked on these little felt objects, and I got a grouping of pears. I was originally thinking, oh, I'm going to do a bunch of fruit and have like these little objects that maybe people who come to the booth and doesn't really need furniture, but wants to just support the booth and support what I'm doing. I wanted to have smaller objects readily available. I experimented a lot with different shapes, some animals, some fruits or vegetables. This was actually the first one I made. I was like, I'm gonna make a pumpkin, and now it looks like an orange, not a pumpkin. And then I made some eggplants, which I really loved, and I figured I'd go back to make some more of those. In the past, I have made apples, but I really fell in love with the shape of the pear, so I made a bunch of pears. I was thinking about crows and used the Glowforge to make little feet for the crows. And then I customized my own little button here. And then Sarah said it didn't look like a crow. This one looked like a blackbird. So moved on from there. I'm like, I wanted to judge the amount of time it takes, because these are all hand stitched. Hand cut them with the exception of the Glowforge bits that I designed on the computer. I wanted to keep the cost low, well under $10. And I needed to weigh out the amount of time it was taking to do these things. And some of these were just a little too much time. So animals, I also made a little kitty. The animals, the crows, I kind of lost interest in because though I liked making them, the patterns and the cutting were a little bit more than I wanted to do in that price range. That's why I did a bunch of pears, and as I was looking at the pears, I really liked them, and I said, I want to make some trees. I started making what I was calling my happy little trees, and I gave them these little expressions. I fell in love with the trees, and I posted these online, and people seemed to really like the trees and their little expressions. And this was a decent enough pattern. They're a little bit more to do than some of the other ones. The pears are pretty much a simple shape that goes together, but with the trees, it's a little more complicated. So I think the trees, I'm probably thinking about an $8 price point for the trees, and my happy little trees, little nod to Bob Ross. I also figured, I'm a very woodsy kind of person. I wanted to keep it in that realm, and then I made a bunch of acorns. These also, though it looks like a simple shape, was a little bit tricky too, because again, everything is completely hand stitched. I'm thinking I want to do like some tree branches, more like foresty kind of themed. This kept me busy. This is what I worked on for those 2 weeks. I thought it would be funny to also make a series called Bad Eggs, but if somebody's a bad egg, you can give them a bad egg. I'm still working on this one. I cut out some new patterns where phrase base of it is an egg yolk, so maybe in next month's vlog you'll get to see an updated version of what that pattern is going to be. I call these couch crafts, things I could do, sit on the couch and stitch up. I want to keep this going. As I'm sitting on the couch in the evening and rethinking about like my next move for the next day, I like to have my hands moving, something meditative. If I knock out a couple of these to a night, I could add $3,500 to my haul at the end of the year if I sell them. Ages ago, I wanted a messenger bag and I could not find a messenger bag to my liking, and so I decided to make one. And this was the style of that messenger bag. I love crazy quilting. Crazy quilting became a thing with the bag style, and every time I used that bag, this is the second version of that, people would constantly ask me about the bag. They're like, where did you get that bag? And I tell them I made it, and oh, you should sell the bag. So thoughts of that. I watch a lot of thrifters who say that even though they're selling primarily furniture in their booth, they still also have some smaller items that they thrifted, whether it be old bag, clothing, that kind of thing. So I thought it would be cool to have something vintage-esque available also. So I remade this. This is my multicolored one, and inside you can see my artist logo. It's corduroy, different materials. I'm a very textural person. I love different textures, so I try to use many different scrapped materials. And then I made a brown one just to have a different color scheme option, green and brown. These are, you might notice some of this color scheme. This was left over from Woodland Feast. So I had all of the scraps from Woodland Feast and I used them as part of this bag series. And actually the Crazy Quilt, this version, are leftovers from not a series that I filmed, but from my own art practice, Victorian themed work that I had going on, and I made a bunch of crazy quilts, and so this is actually scrap pieces left over from that. Not all of it's scrap. This is vegan leather, so there are parts of that, you know, were not necessarily recycled. And then also the lining, I wanted to have a nice canvas lining for them. Technically these are reversible, but I can't imagine why you would have it on the outside. Anyhow, that's those. And then I decided I wanted to do some smaller change purses. This I am still working out. I love the way that it came together on the outside, but I am not at all happy with the inside stitching. It's just not as clean as I would like it to be, so I ripped this out multiple times and actually stopped making these till I kind of resolved what I wanted to do in terms of this stitching here on the inside. I like gold stitching because it matches this stitching here. I made the mistake of lining it with this green so it clashes with this, but maybe the thing to do is to rip this out and go back in with a green so it's a little bit more invisible. It's really hard to get under the metal because it's got metal on the back side and metal on the front side, and the needle, no matter what, wants to hit, so it's hard to get this line clean, which is why I got ripped out multiple times. I don't know, I'm not happy with the look of that stitch. It probably will get ripped out again until I resolve it, and this is what happens. I'm a perfectionist. These are parts to two other bags that I was working on, and before we started moving around the studio spaces, they were the last thing I worked on. I started one bag and then realized I didn't like where the design was going, that the squares were being mixed with the, I guess, stripes. So I ended up turning it into two sets of bags. These are going to be a record bag. This is the inside of the bag actually, and this would be the outside of the bag. I really loved this cork material that I found at Joann's, and it's really awesome to sew. It's really durable, but the facing is real cork, and then it has this little bits of gold flecks inside of it, and I wanted to find a way to use that. So the front of this bag is going to be this, and then again these little bits here are scraps, leftover bits from other projects. These are two separate bags. One will have rectangular ones and then the other ones are going to have the squares. I didn't make any videos of the making of these objects, of any of the bags, of the felted objects, but if you're interested in seeing any of them as a tutorial in the future, let me know in the comments. Alright y'all, so this is like my main work area next to the dragon in front of the garage. As you can see, this is a mess with garden stuff that needs to get dealt with. Let's take a look. Okay, this corner over here, we have these massive problems with weeds. We put down mulch, multiple layers of weed blocker. It gets insanely out of control really, really fast, and we have this awful crabgrass that just keeps coming back. At some point this week, I'm going to be finishing clearing out the rest of those weeds, putting in some weed barrier. Sarah wants to put in rock along here, the little pea rock instead of mulch, hoping that that maybe will suppress it a little bit more. The hose hose reel is new, so that was a project I had to deal with. I installed and concreted that post and then installed the hose reel. The past few days I've been dealing with this drip system. Basically what was happening is all of the beds were mixed in with the pots. There's 4 zones on the timer. We had the back zone, which around here and in through this section, and then I think it's connected to this bed, was way too much for all of that one zone to be on, including the pots, some of these pots, and it was just too much pressure, not enough going on, and the trees weren't getting watered on a regular basis. And honestly, some of the drip system wasn't all that great. So I came in and rerouted all the drip. Here in California, even though we are a microclimate, it gets pretty hot. Things that are in pots need to be watered more regularly. So I finally got it all squared away where all of the beds that are in the ground are on one and the pots are on their own, which took some doing. So if it's getting too hot, they can be put on a schedule where they're watered a little longer, deeper, more days a week. Hopefully I can get some growth out of these trees. I always get trees that come up, they fruit, and then the fruit falls off of them because they weren't getting consistent enough water. I just been so busy to get out here and make sure they get watered every day. The trees are like my thing, and you know, Sarah takes care of like the flowers and a lot of the vegetables, but the trees were always mine. This little front section is on one watering system now, and it all goes back here. And let's take a walk to where it runs, and it will loop around and hit this cage, the tomato cage, and this bed. We used to have a much longer bed. I cut this bed down and shortened it. I'm trying to make this back section basically a work area. There was a bed back there. Now that I've eliminated that back bed and shortened this bed, and we no longer are gonna plant on this side, it's a lot less drip. So being able to just run the drip for this tomato run, this side run here, and that little bit should be more than enough. That's going to be one zone. Then the 4 beds are another zone, and the pots are another zone, and then the back run up through here, which those are pumpkins. We'll get to that in a minute. Okay, so let's take a look at this happenings. At the thrift store run, I found a bunch of parts for this kid's bed, like canopy kid's bed, and because the parts were incomplete, they were just boxes of random parts. So this was part of the base of the bed frames, and it was like, I want to say kits for like 30 different bed frames, like 30 pieces of them. Nothing was fully one complete set. It was just a pallet full of random boxes. This is a potting table that I built out and I put on wire mesh. I think the entire thing cost maybe $4 total because I only paid $1 a box, and I think I used maybe 2 of the boxes and then the wire mesh that we had bought a big roll of that we're using for trellises and whatnot. So I have enough to build another one of these, which I will be building anyway. I'm moving along. So I set up this area by pulling most of the pots and getting them here, so that way everything on pots again can be in the same drip system. These have to get redone. Probably herbs and flowers will go into these once we get things squared away. But back there are the golden prize. Those are the Long Island cheese pumpkins that we get our pumpkin pies out of. Also got some sunflowers in the back line there. That bed was a bit of a pain. Another cheapy Amazon thing was actually 2 beds that I combined into one, and I had to drill into the sides and basically cut sheet metal, re-drill some holes to make it the size that we needed it for, so it didn't impede on the path over there. It's okay. I mean, it's bulging out over there. I had to put in a stake. I don't know if I would necessarily recommend it. We'll see if it makes it through the season, but the good news is that at least it allowed us a good 10 inches of extra dirt, so those pumpkins can get some nice rooting, and a lot of that I mixed compost with the soil from the beds behind me that I pulled out. I had to move lots and lots of dirt so that Sarah could get the pumpkins out. That was another giant chore project that I had to take care of. The other thing that I had to deal with was shoring up the arbors that I built. They're still kind of wonky. They need some reinforcement or maybe to be redone. Because we've already started growing things on them, it's too late. I'd have to do them in the off season. Fortunately, time just got away from us. Things were a little crazier than expected. Ooh, look at that. Some blackberries ready for breakfast. Yeehaw. Yeehaw. Juicy. Yeah. Okay, I have a few more things I need to take care of in this garden before I can get on to doing any kind of furniture building. I got a blackberry here that needs to get connected. I have cucumbers and an alternative pie pumpkin. They're little small ones that are here that need to get planted up on trellises. I have some basil over here that also needs to get potted and then attached to the drip system. Then I still need to go back over there and clean that disastrous area so I have somewhere to work. Alright y'all, that is going to be it for June 2025. I am hoping beyond all hope, that come July I will have a better handle on this chaos mess. So thanks for hanging out with me. Please like, share, and subscribe if you have not done so already, and I hope to see you soon.